Welcome to the July edition of the FO Exclusive. This is our signature program or a signature production, which we do every month. Glenn and I look at the most important issues of the month. Glenn Carle is a senior partner at FOI. He is a retired CIA officer. He is a top geopolitical analyst, and he has been my partner in crime for over 10 years. I'm Atul Singh, the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Fair Observer. We publish over 3,000 authors from over 90 countries. Our goal is to inform and educate. We look at the issues behind the news, and we provide context. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. Last month, we focused on two key issues: Iran trumps Trump in new art of the deal, and two, Keir Starmer falls to the King of the North. This month, we will focus on two key issues again. And those two key issues are, number one, new fronts now in the US-Israel-Iran war. Number two, India's youth cockroach protests rattle Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Before we dive into these two key issues, let us do a quick recap of the month. So, America turned 250 on July 4th. I was in London and in Vienna having a very good time with my friends, but I hurried back from Europe to be here in Washington, D.C. This was my first 4th of July as a citizen. The fly past was impressive, the fireworks spectacular, but the speech, of course, US President Donald Trump's speech was a damp squib. It wasn't quite Thomas Jefferson, certainly not Abraham Lincoln, and a far cry from Teddy Roosevelt. I have Teddy Roosevelt's book right behind me, and I wonder what has happened to the quality of English prose. But we could say the same thing around the world, not just America. Importantly, I met a number of people who had come for the 250th celebrations, quite a few. I can't give you an exact count, but what occurred to me was that many of them coming from hardcore red states, many of them who had voted Republican and only Republican, weren't exactly jumping up and down about either the war or the state of the economy. And that, for me, is a good litmus test. Yes, it is anecdotal. I do not have data. I did not do a survey. But anyway, as we know, even surveys and data, as Sir Humphrey Appleby ably demonstrated, you can have the perfect balanced sample just by asking leading questions. So the conclusion, America at 250, certainly there was a sense of celebration, but also a sense of disquiet. On July 1st, we learned that President Donald Trump's latest financial disclosure shows his various businesses generated more than $2 billion in income in 2025. Note, this is his first year back in the White House. This is more than triple his reported income from the year before, that is 2024. The biggest gains, of course, come from the Trump family's cryptocurrency ventures. Glenn, this is extraordinary. The president is a fantastic businessman. He knows the art of the deal.
Yes, he does. Yes, a sucker is born every minute. So that gives us 60 times 60 times 24 times 365 a year. So there's ample ground for him to conduct his business.
Excellent. So just note that more ugliness came to the fore in the American political system, and this time it was not just because of the Republicans, but even this time it was because of the Democrats. The Democratic candidate in Maine's Senate race suspended his campaign after a woman accused him of raping her. Graham Plattner, war veteran, was a darling of Bernie Sanders. He represented the left wing of the party, the populist left wing of the party, and these disclosures have left egg on his backers' faces also left egg on a party that was going rather woke before Donald Trump rode into the White House. Well, there are cheerier things to note. America, Canada, and Mexico hosted a spectacular FIFA World Cup. The halftime show went on a little longer than most people would have liked. Roy Keane wasn't too pleased. He's a legendary Irish football player, the former captain of Manchester United. Even Wayne Rooney wasn't too pleased. And
Wayne
Rooney
Rooney
is a
was
legendary
definitely not
English player.
pleased.
Pardon me?
Wayne Rooney was definitely not pleased.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, think why they weren't happy to see Shakira, being delectably delightful. I just can't, for the life of me, imagine why people would have a problem with such a fantastic halftime show. But football players
See,
were.
you have succumbed to American crass materialism and commercialism.
I have already. It didn't take long, did it? The final began 6 minutes late. The halftime show went on forever. There were, of course, allegations of corruption, but it's FIFA. So, hey ho, there we go. Spain deservedly won against an ugly Argentina. In 1966, when Britain won the World Cup, rather, England won the World Cup when the World Cup was hosted on home soil. And football has been going home since, but never quite gone home. Coming home, as they say, coming home, but never quite come. No pun intended, by the way. The then British manager called the Argentines animals. And that comment would hold for the behavior of the Argentine players during and after the final. After the final, of course, Trump very charmingly wanted to stay on and celebrate with the players, and the Spanish players wanted him off the podium or off. And Infantino, the infantile head of FIFA, had to drag Trump away. Lindsey Graham, the senior or a senior American senator, as he was from South Carolina, died unexpectedly at the age of 71, which is rather young for a senator. He had just returned from Ukraine. He was pushing a bill to widen sanctions against Russia. Graham was also a close friend of Israel. Immediately, conspiracy theories started swirling around the internet and elsewhere that the Russians had knocked him off. Anyway, the important point is that Lindsey Graham is dead, and this is bad news for Israel and Ukraine. And there'll be an election in South Carolina, and we'll see what transpires. Let's move on across the pond to the UK. The UK has a new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. He's had a good debut in 10 Downing Street. It has been an eventful month for the UK, though. Anne Widdecombe was murdered in her idyllic English village. She was a former member of Parliament. She was also a minister in the Tory government. And she had gone to Strictly Come Dancing, a television show. She was very popular. She had switched from the Tories to the populist right Reform UK. She was its justice spokeswoman. Widdecombe had, was a devout Christian, had converted to Catholicism, and fiercely resisted the transgender movement. Speaking of Catholicism, note that Andy Burnham is a Catholic too, and so was Tony Blair. And Catholics now outnumber Anglicans in the land of King Charles. On another important development in the UK, Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, has resigned from the House of Commons. Apparently, he has taken some cash from a crypto billionaire, and he is being investigated. And of course, he calls this investigation a witch hunt. Therefore, he's resigned. And all of this is happening when more than half of England is in drought. Who would have thought that? I mean, the blessed Green Isle would be in drought because hot, dry weather has taken a toll on the country's water supplies. Some would also argue the privatization of water and then the takeover by private equity of water in the UK might not have helped, but hey ho, there we go. Let's just blame the weather for now. The centrists, let's move on to Hungary.
One strange consequence of global warming is that during my last trip to England, I took gleeful pleasure in buying red wine grown in England. There are now English vineyards.
Yeah. And white wine in Sussex is actually pretty good. So let's move on across the channel now. We've moved across the pond, the Atlantic Ocean. Now we move across the channel, and we won't go into too much detail as to what's going on in Europe, but two political developments got our attention. The centrists, who now hold a supermajority in the Hungarian parliament. There was an election in April. The centrists won. Péter Magyar is the new prime minister. And his party, his new party, and the MPs, or rather the MPs, members of parliament of his new party, have passed a constitutional amendment that would remove Tamás Sulyok from the presidency and Péter Polt as head of the Constitutional Court. Péter Magyar says both of these men put their loyalty to Viktor Orban, the previous prime minister, above the interests of the nation, the Hungarian nation. Ipso facto, they have to go. So Hungary is really cleaning out, or rather defenestrating, to use a metaphor from that part of the world, all of the Orban elite. So this is a major change in Hungary. Now let's move on to France. And in France, the French parliament banned children under the age of 15 from using social media. France follows Australia as the second country to prohibit social media for youngsters by law. We expect this trend to gather strength in developed countries in the months ahead. I've had many discussions with members of parliament and politicians of many countries, of both the right and the left, who are deeply worried about social media. There's been a lot of research now about the addictive qualities of social media. Suicide rates have shot up. This is Professor Jean Twenge's research, if I remember her name correctly, and if I remember the study correctly. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but she's not the only one. There has been a whole body of research, and this research points that the dopamine hits to adolescent brains from social media make social media particularly addictive, lower attention spans, and increase depression, loneliness, anxiety, online bullying, all these wonderful things that come with the new age we live in.
If I can jump in, you talked about attention span, and that's a vital point to retain. Similarly, it appears that the social media changes cognition. It changes the way one thinks. And for hundreds of years, at least, the leading edges of society and societies in general have had a linear logic, rational way of reading, which comes in part from the written page. When social media dominates how one receives and perceives the external world, the receptions are image-based, emotion-centered, as opposed to reason-centered. And it doesn't make one stupider, but it does change the way one perceives and therefore conceives of the world, which is certainly a huge issue. And without passing judgment on it, it certainly is something that one should have some influence on in the way, as a parent, in shaping how a child comes to perceive the world.
We won't belabor the point, but very quickly, a number of parents who in particular concerned about their children's education, have been campaigning for limiting social media. And they've been chronicling their struggles and indeed even severe fights in taking cell phones off their children and getting them to actually do mathematics or do something that requires deep focus over a protracted period of time. So this is a parenting problem, and not just a political or social problem now. It has come down to torment too many families, and this cuts across ideology, at least so far. So let's move on to from France across the Mediterranean to Africa, and we will not cover all the developments. The fighting continues in Mali and Sudan. What's new? The two things that caught our eye in Africa were, one, Emmerson Mnangagwa, if I hope I'm pronouncing this Zimbabwean leader's name correct. Maybe he might take offense and send an assassination squad. I hope not. I very much want to live. But this lovely chap, signed into law constitutional amendments to extend and cement his hold on power. The amendments abolish direct presidential elections and postpone the next vote. Emmerson Mnangagwa is the new Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. So, as the French would say, la plus. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Yes, Robert Mugabe is gone, but there's a new Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. In neighboring South Africa, we do not have a dictator, but there we have populism. There we have economic stagnation. There are no jobs for South Africans. Anti-immigrant sentiment has been rising. Mobs have been targeting immigrants. And things have come to such a sorry state of affairs that Ghana asked Cyril Ramaphosa, the President Cyril Ramaphosa, to postpone his visit. So it's interesting to note that anti-immigrant sentiment exists not just in the US, but all the way in South Africa, the land of Nelson Mandela, the land that came up with a rather tolerant, open, and welcoming constitution not too long ago. After all, it's only in the 1990s that a democratic regime replaced, or a democratic government replaced the apartheid regime. So moving back west to Latin America, a key development occurred in Peru. Keiko Fujimori won Peru's presidential election. Note that her father was president as well. She is Japanese Peruvian. She studied in the US. She's a woman, of course, and another woman is taking charge. There's a woman in charge in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. Claudia Sheinbaum is Jewish in a Catholic country, and Keiko Fujimori is Japanese in a country of mestizo and indigenous people, and of course some descendants of conquistadores, but certainly not the dominant ethnicity. And she's right-wing, unlike Claudia Sheinbaum. And this is interesting that another right-wing candidate has won in Latin America. And I'm told by many people this is because this fear of security, where the left has not controlled crime, the left has left cities unsafe, and so the pendulum has swung the other way. Now let's move on to some economics. And in April, May, and June, stock markets recorded their best quarter in 6 years. The S&P 500 rose by 15% from April to June, the Nasdaq Composite by 21%, and the Pan-European Stocks 600 by 10%. Nikkei 225 had its best 3 months ever, rising by 37%. South Korea's Kospi increased by 68%. That's largely because of semiconductors, I'm told. Even so, share prices of some big tech giants did not fare so well in June, with Apple, Meta, and Nvidia all down. Microsoft's Stock fell by 17%, the worst month since December 2000. The markets have cooled a bit in July. July has not been as frothy. Nevertheless, equity markets last quarter were particularly frothy, and a lot of investors are worried about it. Even as equity markets have been frothy, the economy of many major countries has not been doing well. On July 1st, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz unveiled a package of economic reforms which included 10 billion euros in annual income tax relief. Germany has had no growth for the last few years. In fact, the economy has contracted, and there are no jobs either. And Merz, who's a former corporate lawyer, he is from the CDU, Christian Democratic Union, the center-right party. He's trying his level best to kickstart German economic growth. He's taken off the debt brake. He has promised investment in defense. He's now decreased income tax. He's promised to roll back the regulatory sclerosis in the German economy, the red tape, death by red tape. So let's see where his efforts lead to, because the future not just of Germany, but also of Europe depends on Merz's success. Even as Merz is having a go at lifting the German economy out of the doldrums, yields on Japan's 10-year government bonds reached 2.9%, the highest since 1996. I'll repeat, the highest since 1996. Why does this matter? It matters because gross public debt is over 200% of the GDP. So a rise in interest rates pushes up the costs of borrowing, which means the government pays more in interest and has less left for guns and butter, as Glenn always says. As well as concerns about the weak yen, investors are also worried about how the government is going to fund its recently announced $2.3 trillion 14-year investment plan. So yes, you can see Germany and Japan, the two powerhouses, post-war powerhouses, facing their own challenges. And so actually is the US. The 30-year Treasury yield closed above 5% for 14 straight sessions through on Friday. We are recording this on 29 July. And what we are talking about is 24th of July, Friday. And this is the longest run above that level since July 2007. And remember, in 2007, 2008, we had a massive crisis. It was a global financial crisis. So the 30-year Treasury yields has finished above 5% level 29 times in 2025, already the most in any calendar year since 2007. Okay, so 30-year Treasury yields have crossed the 5% high watermark for the most number of times since 2007. So the danger signs are flashing red. At this time, US President Donald Trump has made a renewed push to impose tariffs using a range of measures. We know he's a genius. He's a very stable genius. And he has threatened to set duties of 50% on Canadian goods on August 19th. In retaliation for Canadian unfair practices, especially by Canadian provinces that don't buy American products. He's also ready to impose a new round of levies on countries after the 10% regime expires. Remember that his tariffs were declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and he's working his way around this judgment. Donald Trump has also announced tariffs of 100% would be introduced for generic drugs from August 2028. This is quite significant. And this will, of course, hurt Indians. Meanwhile, American and Mexican negotiators held another session of bilateral trade talks. Trump has refused to extend the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, his own agreement, and he's negotiating with Canada and Mexico separately to seek changes to the pact. So no certainty of contract, no reliable trading partner, and all of this is happening at a time when bond yields are shooting up. So yeah, we can all cross our fingers if we believe in Jesus or any other god, Zeus. You can go pray. And maybe it is a good time to pray because this has been a month of natural disasters. Forest fires in Spain and France have been highly destructive. Peter Isaacson, our very dear colleague, can attest to it. He lives in Charente-Maritime, and he is not far from all the action. We know that from many climate experts and scientists that Europe is the fastest heating continent in the world, and Europe can expect more of this. Japan's southwestern Kyushu region has just had had an earthquake, and more than 100 aftershocks after this earthquake. This earthquake was yesterday, Tuesday, July 27th, or 27th of July, and has left at least 13 dead already. So that is our recap for July 2026. Obviously, we have left quite a few things out. It is impossible to cover everything that happens in the world.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.